Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Duke Wisdom Podcast. It's Ben McCormick here with Clinton Weaver once again. We're going to talk Duke basketball and Duke football today with some pretty exciting stuff on Duke basketball. We had an exhibition game, our first real exhibition game against non-also Duke opponents, which is always nice to kind of gauge lineups and where everybody's at the start of the season. It was very exciting for me. I got to be there in person. Not on press row like I would have liked to, but I was in the stands and still had a blast nonetheless. My girlfriend and I were at the game and cheering pretty loud at certain moments that we'll definitely talk about. But first of all, Clinton, I want to rope you into this by asking about your first impressions of the very first thing we get to see, the starting lineup, which was a little bit different than we have projected in previous weeks. Can you talk about that one a little bit?
Sure. Well, definitely unexpected to see Malik Brown starting at center instead of Malawach, and also Sion James starting at guard instead of Proctor. And particularly in the context of what Shire said after the game in the press conference, he said that playing time is earned in practice. And so I was wondering, if there's some sort of message there behind that decision, particularly the one to not start Tyrese. But when you look at the total minutes played, actually, Malawach ended up playing more than Brown, and Proctor ended up playing more than James. So maybe we shouldn't read too much into that after all.
Yeah, I think that there's a couple of ways of looking at it. There's the way of, like you said, Caleb, Sion, and Malik all earned their starting positions over Kaman and over Tyrese. I think the other way of looking at this is like, well, even if going forward they kept Tyrese Proctor and Malawach on the bench, I think that is a really useful rotational tool to have two of your best players coming off the bench, because you could say, even if you have the belief that Tyrese is better than Caleb and Sion, that Malawach is better than Brown, you can basically be like, well, okay, but Caleb, Sion, and Malik can hold down Fort in the lineup, and then usually the other team's going to get sort of a break when you go into your second string. But in this scenario, they get Tyrese Proctor and come on Malawach, which is far from a break. Actually, it's better than a lot of teams starting five type players. So what do you think about maybe if that there's some sort of method to making sure the second string is almost as strong as the first string? Do you think there's any merit to that?
Well, I think no matter who comes off the bench, the second string is going to be almost as strong as the first string. The other thing that John said after the game was that he expected the starting lineup to be different next game. So kind of like with Countdown to Craziness, this was an exhibition game. Let's keep that in mind. It was Lincoln. Let's keep that in mind. And, so it's a sample of one. And we all have this tendency to overread way too much into a sample of one. So I think probably we all need to chill out a little bit and at least wait until we have a sample of two, and then we can overreact to that.
Yeah, I'm guilty of that, but that's just because I like to get thinking about different scenarios. But I'm definitely I fall guilty to the overthinking. But I think that you're right, that this is a little bit just maybe of experimentation on John's part, seeing who works in the lineup, who works with who on the floor, that type of thing, because it is Lincoln. It's not exactly the game against Kansas yet, but I think out the gate in that first half, I think they started well. I don't think they started quite as well as I thought they were going to. Now, it is their first time against an opponent, and I have that fully in mind. I think offensively they did fine. I don't think you can really ask for them in their first game against an opponent to shoot much better than they did in the first half. But I think defensively, I at the beginning of the game at least, I was sort of like, okay, they're missing assignments, they're missing rotations in certain places. Now, Lincoln was making some just flat out ridiculous shots at times for a Division II team, which was funny. I think they got a couple guys that belong in Division I, but I think that the defense started out a little slowly, a little slower than I would have liked. Did you see something similar?
Yeah, I gave my tickets to my daughter, and she was at the game, and she was texting me, and she was saying, "Dad, this game is a lot closer than it's supposed to be." And with 10 minutes to go, it was like a 3 point lead. So they were definitely slow out of the gate, and it was a little concerning. John said after the game they have a lot to work on. I think that's true. Um, Definitely on the defensive end of the floor, and but that means he has their attention, and coaches like to keep it that way. Where nobody's getting too fat and happy, especially this early. And I think the team sort of agreed with him that they were unhappy after the game and felt like there was a lot to be improved upon.
Yeah, I think on that topic, it's difficult, and my girlfriend gets mad at me about this. I think we were at the exhibition game they played in 2022, so before the Final Four season, and I don't remember how much exactly they won that game by, but it was nearly 80 points. And I left that game thinking, yeah, they should have won by 100. I was like, I'm a little disappointed they didn't win that by 100. I don't think they played well enough. And she was like, are you kidding me? They just won by 80 points. And so I left that one saying, 51, that's fine. But like they probably should have won that game by 80. And it is what it is, but and it feels so stupid to complain about winning a game by 51 points. But I think when you're trying to measure, not is this a decent basketball team? Of course it is. It's a Duke basketball team. You're trying to measure, is this a national championship level Duke basketball team? And those teams tend to put their foot on the gas and never take it off, ever. I think about the 2015 championship team and their first game of the regular season, just romping Presbyterian by 70 points. That's the kind of kill at all cost kind of attitude you have to have, I think, as a national championship team. And so that's something that I'm hoping this team develops. They are extremely young. There's a lot of new pieces, a lot of things trying to work together. And I think another component that's working maybe against this team for now is the amount of rotation players that John has to work with, that he's trying to figure out minutes, who works with who, and there's so many different players that have to play so many minutes that it's difficult to get in a certain rhythm, where that problem wasn't as big in 2015, where you had a more defined rotation and you just let those guys work with each other. But now it's like you've got 10 options and you got to figure out how those options work with one another and how they're going to become a cohesive unit. So it's difficult. It's difficult to weigh all that. All that said, I'm going to stop complaining about a 51-point win in the first exhibition of the season now. But I got my complaint out, and that's what I'll say.
Well, the second exhibition will definitely be more meaningful, coming as it will against Arizona State. What I will say about this team is they're a lot more polished offensively than last year's team or the year before's team. Coming straight out of the gate. It was very notable that they shot 37 threes. That was an incredibly high number.
Yes.
And they made 40% of those, which is also an incredibly high number. And looking down the box score, almost everybody shot at least 50% from the field, with a couple of exceptions, Caleb and Mason Gillis. But most everybody else was shooting at least a 50% clip. So, coming straight out of the gate, first game, again, it's Liberty, sample of one. Or Lincoln, I'm sorry, sample of one. But it was impressive the way they were making shots. I think maybe some early jitters, but they quickly got over that.
Yeah, their shot making is definitely impressive, especially some of these freshmen. And I want to add that when I'm saying that they're not winning by enough with 51 points, that is not a comparison to an average Duke team. Like last year's team, 2 years ago, those teams, a 51-point win in an exhibition, that would have thrilled me. That would have thrilled me. The only reason I think that there are any reservations about what this team did on Saturday is just because of how high the expectations are for them. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, the expectation is this is a national championship team. But that said, I think that you're right. They shot the ball incredibly well. I think if they could shoot the ball, I mean, obviously they're not going to shoot 40% from three every single night, but if they can shoot with around that consistency from three as a team, you're looking at a really deadly team. Especially if you've got Khan working the way he did, and I think that's the guy that caught the most attention. That's the name that's been going around Duke Twitter and all the spaces is that this guy he just doesn't miss. That's what Isaiah Evans said, and it sure seemed like that to start the game. I mean, this guy is a certified shooter, but I think what took me by storm was his frame. Like he was able to defend a lot better than I thought he would be able to. He's got more size to him, so he's not exactly Luke Kennard because he's got a little bit more size to him than Luke, and he's got apparently a little bit more athleticism than I thought he had because I didn't know he had that poster in him. When he put that one down, I was standing up yelling after that one, man. I didn't know he had that in him at all. But I mean, what else did you see from Khan that really impressed you?
Well, on more than one occasion, the announcer made reference to a Knueppel triple, which I think might become a catchphrase before this year is over. He has a shot that looks every bit as surefire as Jared McCain's, and I'm very happy about that because he's just going to be instant offense. You're right, he has a little more of like a barrel chest, a little more heft, a little more meat on the bones, but that does not seem to prevent him from going airborne. Cooper enjoyed that dunk, it seemed like, more than maybe Khan did, which was great to see. And, and I was also impressed with Cooper's offense. He shot 8 of 16 from the floor, 2 of 5 from 3. But his shot looks pretty solid to me and beyond the stripe as well. So if those two guys can light it up like that, and if Tyrese can find his shot on a regular basis, then that's the triple threat that we've been looking for.
Want to join a community of Duke accounts publishing news, theories, and predictions on Duke athletics? Join the Duke Wisdom Network. Just go to dukewisdom.org/join network today and fill out the form with your name and social media. Or you can DM at Duke_wisdom on Twitter or Instagram. Become a part of the community of Duke fans publishing their takes today. Again, that's dukewisdom.org/join network to DM at Duke_wisdom on Twitter or Instagram.
Well, let's hone in on Cooper for a second because I think that Cooper Flagg did pretty much everything that we could have expected from him. Like he scored the ball at all three levels at a very efficient clip. He defended at a very high level, 4 blocks, and he distributed at a very high level as well. And that is in limited minutes in this exhibition game. I mean, he did everything that we imagined, and I came out of that with full confidence. If I didn't already, I came out of that game with full confidence that Cooper Flagg is going to be a consistent player for Duke. Every day he's going to be a threat because the things he does on the court are the types of things that are just going to be brought every day. He didn't make 6 or 7 threes. Like if he had done that, I would have been like, all right, that's not going to happen every day. But the types of things he was doing are just part of his game, part of his DNA, and they're things that he's going to bring day in, day out. And I'm very confident that he is a high level first option in a Duke uniform.
Yeah, he is the first option. He took 5 more shots than anybody else, and that's what I expect to see from game to game. The only thing I might quibble about is he was 4 of 7 from the line. We'll see if that's an anomaly or not. But he is a Swiss Army knife, man. He can do everything, and he is as advertised. I saw some people on Twitter being underwhelmed. Well, you go ahead and be underwhelmed because he's going to underwhelm the hell out of you for the duration of this year. I'm super impressed, and he definitely deserves the preseason All-American accolades that he got today.
Yeah, if they're underwhelmed by that, I mean, it's just all they're looking for is flashy dunks. If that underwhelmed you, frankly, because yeah, he's not doing the 360 dunks that Zion Williamson was doing, and we've said before he's not going to average the same thing that Zion or RJ did points wise. But I think in terms of, I can't think of a freshman who's been better at setting up offense better than he is, other than maybe like Tyus Jones in recent memory at least. And then amongst one and dones. And then you look at defensively, I mean, Derek Lively might be, a better shot blocker as a freshman. Very, very few are going to be better than him. And then scoring, there's going to be a couple that are more successful scorers, but he is within the top 3 of everything he does on the floor. He's a top 3 one and done at Duke to ever do each of those things. And when you combine that across the board, that's going to give him a really good case to be at the very tippy top of the all-time one and dones list at Duke, I think.
Yeah, I kind of yearn for the old days, where they stuck around for 4 years, because I'd love to see 4 years of this with Cooper, but of course we know that's not going to happen. But yeah, 4 blocks. Malawach had 2, Cooper had 4, so if that's any indication, he really loves to play defense. He's got a high motor. Came from out of nowhere to swat that one and almost hit his head on the backboard in the process. So, yeah, he's the real deal on both ends of the court. I love the way he can drive and draw and dish, and Khan's just sitting out there salivating at the 3-point line. The way they're going to play off of each other, I think, is really going to be a nice 1-2 punch.
Well, he's just an absolutely fantastic off-ball defender, and that's where most of those blocks come in, because he's not just like swatting dudes in front of him. He's just coming at, like you said, he's coming out of nowhere. He's a fantastic kind of power forward slot kind of. The guard leads him into the paint. Kaman comes over and shows, and then out of nowhere, Cooper Flagg's getting that block, and he's so good at that in a way that I haven't seen many college players do that, especially guys that aren't 7 feet tall. You very rarely see a guy that isn't already a 7-footer with that kind of help side shot blocking that Cooper Flagg has. So that's really impressive. And I want to touch on something that you talked about earlier. You talked about him going 4-7 from the line. I don't know what is it with these high level freshmen, man. They can't hit free throws. Like Marvin Bagley was a bad free throw shooter. Jaleel Okafor was bad at it. Jabari Parker was kind of average. Zion was bad. RJ Barrett was bad. He might be cursed. It might be a curse, honestly, and I really hate that.
I don't know how he shot in high school, but he definitely has the shot in the course of the game. So, as they say, the free throw is free and it's unguarded. Technically, it should be the easiest shot there is outside of a layup, maybe, but it can get between your ears. Caleb has struggled a little bit. Tyrese missed his first one. Caleb kind of figured it out last year as the season went along. So we'll see if Cooper can do the same thing.
Yeah, free throw shooting is just totally a mental game. I mean, as a Giannis fan and enthusiast, I can tell you, the best of players in the world can be some of the worst free throw shooters. It feels almost illegal for Giannis to be as good of a mid-range shooter as he is, and then when he hits that stripe, he's one of the worst in the NBA. And that's just how it goes. But let's talk about, and you've mentioned him multiple times now, Tyrese Proctor. I had a tweet about 3-headed all ACC monster of Cooper Flagg, Knueppel, and Tyrese Proctor. And I've been heavy on this Tyrese Proctor wave. I believe in his ability to be this team's Wendell Moore with every fiber of my being. I was very surprised not to see him in the starting lineup, although I think that is going to change. I not only think he should be there over Sion James, I think that Tyrese Proctor is more valuable this season than Caleb Foster is. And I think that, if that first game is any indication, then I might be right, but it is just one game. It's a small sample size, and so I'm not going to count out Caleb just yet, but I have a lot of belief in Tyrese. As a defender, as a leader, showed an improved shot and an improved willingness to get to the rim and finish through and around contact, which I loved seeing from him. And so from what I saw from Tyrese Proctor, this is a guy playing with a chip on his shoulder. Everybody doubts him. I mean, nobody thinks this guy's good. And I think the rhetoric around him is a little bit too harsh on him. I posted something about the last 15 or 16 years of starting point guards, and I got a lot of comments about how bad Tyrese Proctor is. And I'm like, well, nobody's saying anything about Tyler Thornton being a 2-time starting point guard. He averaged 3 points. But like everybody's ragging on Tyrese, who's already a double-digit point per game scorer and a solid starting point guard, but who I think is only going to get better. I know that you're skeptical about Tyrese, so let's bring the Duke Wisdom podcast down to earth on Tyrese Proctor. That's why you're here. That's why you're here, because I would just speak highly of him for 40 minutes. I need somebody to bring him down to earth.
Well, the first shot he shot was an air ball. It was a solid foot short of the goal.
Yeah, that is true.
And the first free throw was a brick. And then he did much better, obviously, after that. I'm thinking back to last year. He wasn't finishing strong around the basket. I don't know if maybe he wasn't healthy or he was worn down as the year went on. He certainly didn't have the cast of supporting players last year that he has this year, which could make a huge difference in how he performs. So the jury is out for me. I'm not saying, that he's a schmuck or anything. And he could take a big leap. The one that we were expecting last year that didn't happen could come this year. It very well could happen. I'm just waiting to see. I don't trust his outside shot. And, he hasn't proven to me that he can make that on a reliable basis. But if he's willing to stay within himself, he's a great defender, like you say, and he can facilitate for other people. He's got a good handle, and he did finish well in this particular game, so hopefully that's a sign of things to come. But, again, it was Lincoln. So I just want to see what happens against the next level. And I want to see him stay within his role and not try to do too much for this team, because he doesn't need to do too much for this team. He needs to facilitate, and make the occasional shot, make his free throws, be that leader, like you say, perfectly capable of that, be that lockdown defender. That's really all we need from Tyrese, I think, on this team.
Well, I can't blame you for not having faith in his shot. I mean, frankly, he's not shown a lot of consistency in that shot. He hasn't shown a lot of consistency in his offense, period. And I think that's what we're looking for from Tyrese this year, is consistency. All in all, that's what we need. Because he's shown glimpses. But he has not put it together for long stints during the season. And that's why I keep hammering away at that Wendell Moore comparison, because, I mean, there was no point in Wendell Moore's first 2 seasons in which he was a consistent player and certainly not a consistent shooter. But as a junior, he was a pillar of consistency. You weren't getting 20 a game out of him, but you were getting 13 a game out of him. And he was setting up the offense. He was leading, and he shot 40% from 3, which is something I never thought I would see Wendell Moore do during those first 2 years, because he was a very, very much below average 3-point shooter, like at best usually. And he became a very dependable 3-point shooter, perhaps even the team's most dependable, until AJ Griffin really became a consistent shooter. And I think I just really, really believe that's what Tyrese can be. But I can't blame you or anybody else for having the reservations that says he's given me no reason to trust him consistently so far. To that I say, you're absolutely right. Like, he hasn't. And so that's why I'm so curious to see what he does this upcoming Sunday, and to see what he does in some of these really big non-conference battles. But will he step up? Will he be able to score in big moments? Because another thing about him, I think, is that he hasn't scored in those big moments, right? Like, he's had some scoring games against the Delawares of the world, but when, Carolina comes to town, is Tyrese Proctor still scoring 20?
Right. And we did see some big time performances out of Caleb last year in big games, most notably the Michigan State game early on. I know he didn't have a big game against Lincoln, but part of me has more trust in Caleb. I know you feel the opposite. I'm looking for that sophomore jump out of Caleb. He was injured last year, which I think really hindered the whole team down the stretch not to have him. And so I'm anxious to see what he can do when he's fully healthy now.
Yeah, I think that with Caleb, well, you'd rather have a big game against Michigan State than Lincoln, right? So, I mean, if Caleb Foster is a guy that steps up in the moment, then he's a guy that steps up in the moment. I mean, if he doesn't put up big games against the Maines and the Armies, then, we'll live with that, I think, as long as he's putting up those games against Arizona and Kansas. I think that Caleb's a really capable scorer. I think that there's a lot to Caleb's game to like offensively. I think he's perhaps a more diverse talent offensively than Tyrese Proctor is in terms of his ability to score. I would say that he's a few paces behind Tyrese as a defender, and he is a few paces behind him as a floor general, I think. Not necessarily a passer per se, but I think that Tyrese is a little better at commanding an offense at the moment. Although Caleb did get a lot of reps at point guard last season, actually. So I do like Caleb as a scorer. I think I have a similar concern with him as I do with Tyrese with consistency. He hasn't shown a ton of consistency in his ability to score. And I think maybe a lot of that is attributed to the crowdedness of the backcourt last season, because most of the shot attempts went to Jeremy Roach and Jared McCain. So maybe, just maybe, we'll get lucky enough to see both the consistency of Foster and Proctor on the rise, because they don't have to share the shots with Jared and Jeremy anymore. All the backcourt looks, for the most part, I mean, with Sion and Khan obviously getting their shots, but Khan's sort of part of the front court as well. But for the most part, they're getting a lot of those point guard-esque shot opportunities and looks. So hopefully their consistency will be better this year.
Yeah, I think the flow's going to be better offensively. John made some references to the ball sticking every now and then, but overall, this team seems to share the ball better, and you got Cooper out there handling the ball as well. So if they're willing to share it and keep the offensive flow going, then the shots are going to come for everybody, and that problem might just take care of itself. You never hate to lose people like McCain and Roach, but truth is, this could be some addition by subtraction, because roles are going to be clearer. There's going to be more minutes. And, that can help build confidence to know that you're going to be out there playing a certain amount and not fighting, with three other guys for your spot on the floor.
Well, so in terms of rotation talk, and that's one of the last things I want to touch on for this Lincoln game, because there's one more intriguing kind of rotational piece to talk about, and I think that has to do with Isaiah Evans, a guy that maybe got lost in the rotation a little bit, because I found it a little bit, it was a little curious to see that Darren Harris came off the bench so much earlier than Isaiah Evans. I mean, I wasn't that shocked to see that he came off before Isaiah, but to see it take a lot longer for Isaiah Evans to come off that bench than it did for Darren Harris, I think that was interesting. What did you think about that?
Yeah, I believe Harris got 2 minutes in the first half. He had 13 total. Evans had 10, so he kind of maintained that 2 to 3 minute margin, principally because he played in the first half and Isaiah didn't. Evans proved to be what he's advertised to be, Vinny the microwave. He poured in a couple of threes. Shot looked really good. So, yeah, personally, I would probably have put Evans ahead of Harris, especially knowing that he had family in the crowd. But John doesn't make the decisions based on that. He makes them based on what's going on in practice, and we don't know what's going on in practice. So whatever it is, you can only presume that's why Harris hit the floor first.
Well, I suspect the reason that Isaiah came in after Darren is defense. That's what I assume, because I mean that's what we've thought about Isaiah. The thing that's going to keep him off the floor is defense, because clearly, like you said, the dude can shoot, the dude can score. There's one thing about Isaiah Evans: he touches that ball, he's probably going to shoot it. Like he's a guy that likes to score, and so I think that's valuable. I think there's youthful aspects to both Darren and Isaiah's games, but I think that Darren is probably just slightly more of a reliable defender. Like you can put him into a big time game and he'll be able to hold his own defensively better than Isaiah could at the moment. And so I think Isaiah's upside is a lot higher than Darren's, but I think that at the moment, I think it was pretty telling to where Isaiah Evans probably is as a defender that he didn't get to play in that first half.
Yeah, Harris has the bigger body, the more mature body, and when it comes to higher level competition, that'll become even more evident because I think Evans will get pushed around a lot. And so he just needs to hit the weight room and hope he sticks around for a year or two, because he'll definitely be an emerging star if he's willing to pay his dues and build up his body and get a little stronger.
Well, talking about paying your dues, the last topic of conversation for the Lincoln game, we got some walk-on buckets, and very notably for the Duke Wisdom podcast, Stanley Borden was freed. In fact, he got to play. You texted me after that game talking about Stanley got a bucket. I'll tell you, when he came into that game, my girlfriend and I we were standing up cheering for him, and then when he gets the ball under the basket, I'm not gonna lie to you, I really thought Stanley was gonna smoke it. I thought he was gonna. He looked nervous. I was nervous for him. I thought he was gonna miss. I kind of did a little bit, but he clutched up. He got his first bucket in Cameron, and I can't be prouder. I mean, I can't be prouder. The campaign has worked. Stanley Borden was freed, and he scored.
Well, congratulations to Stanley. And Spencer. We can't leave Spencer out now. He scored.
Oh, no.
And he almost had a 3-point play, which would have been, just icing on the cake. But, of course, he missed a free throw. But glad to see both of them officially in the score sheet with 2 points apiece.
Right. A very impressive finish by Spencer, might I add. But Cameron was going crazy for the both of them, including myself. The two loudest moments of the game for me were certainly Spencer's and one bucket and Stanley's bucket as well. It only took Stanley 4 years to get a bucket in Cameron, but dang it if I'm not proud of him. And so on that note, on the note of something happening for the first time in Duke history, the Duke football team got a victory over Florida State for the first time ever. The Blue Devils are now 6-1, which means they are already bowl eligible. And I mean, they were that close to getting a win on Georgia Tech. This Duke team could very easily be 7-0 right now, which seems wrong, because this team doesn't look like a 7-0 team necessarily, and certainly the preseason expectations weren't that high. But something's clicking, and this team is doing well. Now, I know Florida State's not the best team in the world, but nonetheless, a win over Florida State is a win over Florida State, and you'll take it. So Clinton, you saw that one. You saw it went down. Talk to me a little bit about Duke football's win over Florida State on Friday night.
Well, it really came down to 3 plays, and they were all turnovers, and they were all consecutive turnovers by Florida State. The first one being the most important. Chandler Rivers returning one to the house for a pick 6, and that put Duke ahead 7-3. And then the next possession, first play, Florida State fumbles deep in their own territory. We convert that into another touchdown. Florida State gets the ball back, throws another pick, and we've got the ball again deep in their territory, turn that into 3 points. So we go from down 3-0 to up 17-3, just like that. And those 3 plays all turnovers, all consecutive plays. Don't think that had ever happened in Florida State history. That really turned the game around quickly. And, Florida State shot themselves in the foot a lot, and a lot of penalties, 4 turnovers, really should have been 5. Duke had an interception that wasn't called an interception toward the end of the game. And so they kind of couldn't get out of their own way. We didn't have a good game offensively at all, 180 yards of total offense, but defensively, we did what we needed to do. We gave up 1 touchdown on the kickoff return to start the second half, which, pulled them within 4. But then we came right back and kicked a field goal to put the lead back up at 7. And so every time they scored, we scored, and maintained that 7-point margin where Florida State never had the ball down less than 7. And so they were trying to climb out of a hole pretty much the whole second half. And we were able to maintain that margin. As an old-time Duke fan, I tend to get that sinking feeling sometimes, like, oh no, here we go again. They're going to mount this huge comeback and we're going to crumble like a cookie. But it didn't happen. Defense was stout and came away with the victory.
Well, I think that's kind of been the story for the season, right? The defense has been pretty stellar for Duke football this year, but the offense has left a lot to be desired at times, and I think that, and I don't want to be a negative Nancy here, but I think that probably is going to be the undoing of this team down the stretch. There's going to be some game where the defense isn't able to contain the other team just quite enough, and the offense is going to fall short. And I think maybe we saw that a little bit with the Georgia Tech game. We got a little preview of that. And I think that's something that I'm really a little bit concerned about for the next couple of weeks, because we got SMU, who's a number 22 team in the country, and then Miami, the number 6 team in the country, in the next 2 games. And it almost feels like, well, when you're playing a top 25 team, sometimes defense isn't going to be able to win the entire game for you. You got to be able to post points. You got to be able to consistently post points. Do you think that's something that this team is going to be able to be able to remedy over the next 2 weeks?
Well, I do agree with you. They kind of got worn down, it looked like, in the fourth quarter against Georgia Tech. I was really worried that was going to happen again against Florida State. It didn't. So I think having the bye week helped, in terms of being refreshed and having more strength at the end of the game. How that's going to play out this week against SMU obviously remains to be seen. It's notable that we're number 5 in the country in terms of yards allowed per play. So our defense is the real deal. The offense, has got to stay on the field a little bit more to give them a chance to rest. I think Manny Diaz pointed out legitimately that we're missing 3 of our top offensive players, our top tight end, our top running back, and we were also missing our top wide receiver. And so that's 3 out of 11 players on the offensive side of the ball who weren't playing on Saturday. And that's a real point to be made. But the offense just has not clicked all year long, and regardless of who's been out there, it's been a struggle. Manny said the goal was to get to 24. In that game, we got to 23, and we won the game. It's probably going to be a similar type of situation with SMU, where the defense has got to come through, and then we hope, we get 3 touchdowns and a field goal maybe out of the offense.
Well, how much of the offense's struggle do you think can be attributed to Malik Murphy? Because he's clearly, he's not a bad quarterback, but he's not the best passer in the world, and then clearly, he refuses to run the ball. So how much do you think you can blame the offensive struggles on Malik Murphy?
Well, the quarterback gets all the praise when things go well, so I guess they also get the blame when things don't go so well. And yeah, he's been inconsistent. He doesn't run, and so people don't have to play him to run. They know he's not going to. There was one play in the Florida State game where they brought in Beeline, the second stringer, but then they ran it as a trick play where Beeline handed off to Hagens. Hagens flipped it to Murphy, who was also in the game. They had two quarterbacks on this play. And then Murphy threw it back to Hagen down the field. So that really doesn't count, because they weren't using Beeline even as a quarterback when they did put him in the game. So I'd like to see them, switch it up a little bit. Give the other guys on the bench maybe a shot, because they are different. They each have different strengths, and why not? Why not?
Yeah. Well, only time will tell. We've got an interesting top 25 matchup with SMU in football, and we've got a Division I exhibition against Arizona State. Bobby Hurley's Sun Devils taking on our Blue Devils. So I think it's going to be an interesting weekend for Duke athletics. And next time for the Duke Wisdom podcast, we'll be breaking down the schedule and everything. We were gonna do that in this episode, but I'm gonna make that a separate episode. We've been going for a little while, so I'll give you guys a break on the eardrums. You don't have to listen to us any longer than this, although I know you want to. And if you do, go ahead and subscribe to the podcast, follow wherever you're listening, and follow Duke Wisdom on Instagram and Twitter as well. And we'll talk to you guys later.